Today, let's look at 8 different types of minimalists. If you're trying to find out what type of minimalist you are, it all comes down to motive. What is the reason behind your journey to less? What is your goal? Let's start with the first type, the authentic or lazy minimalist. Motto: own and do only what you need. When I was little, I actually heard the term minimalist quite a few times, but it had a very different meaning than it does for most people nowadays. Back then, a minimalist was someone who did only what was absolutely necessary. For example, in school, the child who on an assignment to write 200 to 500 words wrote, you guess it, 200 words. I remember it being quite a negative term, and you would always hope to not be paired with such a child in a group task, because you would already expect to do all of the work for them. So to this person, minimalism comes very naturally. It is not something that he or she first has to hear and learn about. Minimalism is also not limited to possessions. It is so ingrained in this person that simplicity influences their whole life. For example, they're always looking for the quickest or easiest solution. They avoid anything complicated. They might even choose to not talk a lot, or choose to be a social minimalist, because dealing with other people can be very complicated, and if you stay alone, you can do whatever you please. It is like there is always this one question guiding them through life. What is the easiest way to do this? I once heard that lazy people are actually kinda smart since they work smart, not hard, and I guess this applies very well to the lazy minimalist. And since owning only a few things is very helpful to lead a simple life, not having too much possessions also comes naturally to them as well. If you think about it, it is actually also a very natural state of being for us humans. Like, have you ever watched a survival show like Naked and Afraid? A big part of survival is not to exert yourself, to conserve energy, and some participants have made it to the end only because they limited their activity to a very low degree. You could now think, isn't the authentic minimalist pretty similar to the extreme minimalist, since their whole life is centered around this philosophy? I'd argue against it, because an authentic minimalist might shy away from the extreme deprivation of physical items that an extreme minimalist follows, since at some point it makes life more difficult to navigate. And just as mentioned before, let's continue with the extreme minimalist. Motto: own as little as possible. Extreme minimalists are very strict about how many items they possess, and maybe even have a number, like something between 50 and 150 items. They constantly try to minimize their possessions even further. They might be even so strict that they don't accept gifts or instantly re-gift them. They might also be extreme in other areas, like diet or beliefs. Extreme minimalism is more often, but not exclusively, practiced by single or child-free people. All or almost all sentimental items are digitized. Extreme minimalists might also seek different types of living arrangements, like a tiny house, van life, or living in a community or shared place, since shared items aren't personal belongings. If an extreme minimalist has his own place, he might live furniture-free or at least with very little furniture. Extreme minimalists are sometimes criticized for taking it too far and being selfish, for example, because they might not own a couch where you can sit together, or not even own enough cutlery for guests. I think extreme minimalism can also be seen as a wish of returning to the natural human state, as we are all born with nothing and leave this world with nothing. The moderate minimalist. Motto: own only what you need and love. In contrast to the extreme minimalist, we have the moderate minimalist. This type of minimalism is more often practiced by families, since having children automatically comes with more stuff. The moderate minimalist is very fond of the idea and philosophy of minimalism, but he doesn't want to take it to the extreme. She is not concerned about how many items she owns and almost never knows a number, but still doesn't like to be surrounded by too many things. He maybe also has a small collection, like a book collection, coin collection, or craft supplies. She doesn't have an issue with owning double or triple of an item if necessary. He finds joy in pretty things, but still is a very mindful consumer and only buys when and what is necessary, but he is no anti-consumer, meaning he is fine with buying the things he needs and maybe sometimes also just something he wants. They value their comfort and therefore don't want to make their life harder by owning too little things or be lacking in things that make their life easier and more comfortable. The moderate minimalist will keep some sentimental items, but maybe still chooses only a few selected ones, or he might limit them to one box. Being a moderate minimalist might be more sustainable in the long run, and some extreme minimalists might turn to moderate minimalism after a while or switch back and forth. The eco-minimalist. Motto: own only what does not harm the planet. The eco-minimalist is very concerned about the environment and sustainability, and their biggest goal is to reduce their environmental impact. She is a very mindful consumer or even part of the anti-consumption movement due to these concerns. He buys mostly or only eco-friendly and second-hand products. They are very mindful about the materials their items are made of and mostly choose natural materials like wood and wool. They most likely also follow a zero-waste and plastic-free lifestyle. He tries to repair items to elongate their lifespan. An eco-minimalist is mostly motivated by moral and ethics. They are also often vegetarian or vegan. If they do have to declutter something, they will do so very mindfully and make sure it's recycled or reused by someone else by selling or donating it. Some eco-minimalists might also be interested in homesteading and self-sufficient independent living. And of course, an eco-minimalist loves spending a lot of time in nature. The frugal or financial minimalist. Motto: own and buy only what doesn't cost much. The frugal minimalist is very resourceful. The goal is to live with what you already have instead of buying new things. So the small number of things in their home often stems from not wanting to spend too much money. A frugal minimalist will often possess a larger number of the same items because he buys in bulk, like flour, toilet paper, soap, and so on. So their pantry might not look minimal at all. But they will still own the smallest number possible of items that aren't really necessary to avoid cost and effort. Things will be used until they almost fall apart because they don't care so much or at all about aesthetics. The financial minimalist might be prone to accept free gifts and samples or hand-me-downs from friends and family. He might also be prone to keep things longer than necessary because what if you need it in 3 years and then have to buy it again? He is often also quite handy because he tries to repair everything he can. Even though their lifestyle is sustainable by accident, they might not always be super eco-friendly because buying the cheapest products often means that they aren't of very good quality and origin. But there is of course also frugal minimalists that are very concerned about the environment and might choose more expensive but sustainable options, especially if they have a coupon. Because frugal minimalists are often bargain hunters and couponers, they might sometimes be tempted to buy things they don't really need just because they are on sale. Financial minimalists might also struggle with rewarding themselves because of not wanting to waste money. But they might be experts in how to have a good time without having to spend a lot of money. Frugal minimalists might also aspire to follow the FIRE movement, which means financial independence, retire early. The aesthetic minimalist. Motto: own only pretty things that match your home and/or style. The aesthetic minimalist cares a lot about the looks of their surroundings, like neutral and matching colors, like black, white, gray, beige, clean spaces and surfaces, no clutter in general, and a clean and calm vibe. The aesthetic minimalist might actually be more interested in minimalism as an art form than a lifestyle, and they might even have first encountered it as an art movement or as an interior design trend. So the reason for not having so many objects in their home might be more because they want to reduce visual clutter than being concerned about the number of things they own. Another reason why they stay true to the saying quality over quantity is because they might be drawn to expensive or designer pieces of which most of us can't afford more than a few. The aesthetic minimalist might be very artsy and talented in areas such as design and photography. Some aesthetic minimalists focus more on looks than intention, and they might switch their objects, furniture, clothes, and so on more often than other types of minimalists. But in a way, a lot of minimalists also take aesthetic into consideration, because if your 5 shirts match with all of your pants and skirts, you need much less clothes. Another reason one might be drawn to aesthetic minimalism might be if one feels easily overwhelmed by mess, for example, a highly sensitive person or someone with sensory processing disorder. The aesthetic minimalist is the type that creates all those beautiful and motivational Pinterest boards and perfect YouTube videos for us. The traveling, nomadic, or experiential minimalist. Motto: own only what you can carry. This type is very similar to the extreme minimalist, but with a slightly different motive. The motive of the traveling minimalist of not wanting to possess too many items is mostly due to travel lightly. They might not have an issue with owning more possessions, it is just a necessity because else their traveling lifestyle won't work. Since they often stay in hotels, Airbnbs and such, they can rely on finding items on site, and the nomadic minimalist might for that reason own even fewer items than an extreme minimalist with an apartment or house. In short, the experiential minimalist values experience and travel over possession. And lastly, we have the mindful minimalist, or the sage. Motto: owning is attachment. This type often gets forgotten because it's not actually a type of minimalist that we encounter very often, and especially because this type of minimalist would probably not even label himself as a minimalist. Minimalism is practiced as a religious belief in not hoarding earthly possessions, but rather gathering wisdom. Examples would be the Buddha or monks. When you look at the teachings of Buddha, he encourages us to not only detach from material possessions, but also from any desire we have, since it's the cause of our suffering. So the motive of this minimalist might be personal growth and mostly spiritual development. These were the 8 types of minimalists covered in this video. Most people will likely identify with more than one type. Actually, there are some common combinations, like to be a moderate and aesthetic minimalist, a nomadic and extreme, or eco and extreme minimalist. While creating this video, I realized that I really wish to be an extreme minimalist, but in fact I am actually a mix of moderate, lazy, and frugal. Which type are you? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you next time.